Matt Ragland is a YouTuber, podcaster, and bullet journal aficionado.
Hi everyone, my name is Matt. Hi everyone, my name is Matt. Hi everyone, my name is Matt. Hi everyone, my name is Matt.
His awesome content centers around helping people, particularly other creators, get more done, create good habits, and find balance in their lives.
What if I told you that you never had to start from scratch again?
Matt is currently just shy of the 60k sub mark on YouTube and was able to turn full-time content creator at the end of 2020. This was mainly due to having built up an email following and community of like-minded people over the years, allowing him to turn course creator and coach.
The channel is doing great, over 50,000 subscribers. My email list is growing. I'm doing coaching, both one-on-one and in groups.
I was lucky enough to sit down with Matt and talk about how he initially found his niche,
Emulate but don't duplicate.
went on to build and grow his email list.
For anyone listening, and especially YouTubers, podcasters too, but absolutely build an email list.
And launch his courses successfully.
It is actually easier to sell to people a $5,000 coaching package than it is to sell 100 people a $100 product.
Matt also gave a lot of great advice on how and why to monetize, the need for different revenue streams, and how you too could go full-time.
A common misconception for YouTubers from a monetization strategy is that you can do it all just from AdSense.
Having originally started his content creation journey with blogging, we start the conversation with Matt telling us why he decided to turn his hand to YouTube in the first place, and just how it was that he got started.
For me, I've always really liked video. Like, I've always been shooting little clips. Like, I had a little 8mm camera when I was growing up, and I did like TV production and even a little journalism work throughout high school and into college. And so I always enjoyed like doing video. And when things became more and more accessible with even just iPhones and like DSLR and even just regular cameras became a lot more accessible, and 1080p HD video became a lot easier to get access to. I was like, let's just give this a try, because at that point I started my YouTube channel in February 2017, so just over 4 years ago now, and I had been blogging for a while. I had done freelance web design for a little while, and I even had a podcast. And so I had tried like all these other channels, and I really enjoyed the podcast, but there were things about it that I just wasn't able to stay as consistent with at the time. And I was like, all right, I'm going to give this, the only thing that I haven't tried is video, and it's the thing that I kind of did maybe the most growing up. And so it was a really kind of natural experiment for me to run. And the other thing, I'm sure we'll talk about this in some other like questions too, but the challenge that I had for myself and the thing that I had struggled the most with up until that point was consistency with my blog content, consistency with the podcast. Kind of one of the reasons I just kind of stopped doing the podcast was like, oh, I haven't done a podcast episode in a few months. Now I feel bad. I'm not any good at this anymore. So I just kind of stopped doing it. And so I started my YouTube journey by posting 30 videos in 30 days. And I just went like, I'm going to practice. I need to be consistent. And then after that, for the most part, for the rest of the year, I did about a video a week. So I ended 2017 with, I think, about 65 published videos.
Oh my God. Okay, hang on. Before we dive into anything else, 30 videos in 30 days is crazy. How was that for you, and why?
Well, like I said, I wanted to be consistent. I wanted to practice a lot, and it was really challenging because one of the things about YouTube, and you can kind of talk about this in any kind of social media platform at this time, but there's one of the things that I took a lot of inspiration from was Gary Vaynerchuk at the time was talking a lot about document, don't create. And that took a lot of creative pressure off of me, because there's a lot going on in our family at the time, and I was making a transition inside of the company at ConvertKit, and we were actually our family was moving, and so there was a lot happening in that month. And in the past, I probably would have thought about, and sometimes can still fall into this trap of there's too much going on, so I'm not going to create stuff. But instead, for this month, decided I'm just going to document everything. I'm going to create videos about work and about how we're moving and about getting settled in a new city, and there were no limits or restrictions that I put on what kind of content that I was going to create. And that was a really big key also and again, this kind of changes and morphs and shifts throughout a creative career, because I don't right now feel as much freedom to create different types of content as I did back then. So it's kind of a nice thing as well. But I was I'm going to create a video every day, and it doesn't matter necessarily what the content's about. It doesn't matter how long it is. It doesn't matter how nicely the video is edited or what the music sounds like. I'm just going to publish a video every day, and I'm going to go from there.
Wow. Okay. So a lot of people, myself included, firstly have a bit of a breakdown when they're starting YouTube and go, oh my God, there's so many things. But there is genuinely a lot of things to consider, and creating a video isn't at least from the outside in, it's you just sit in front of a camera, but there is actually a lot that goes into filming a video. I guess, like you've said, you were already interested in that sort of stuff, and you had cameras and stuff growing up, but still, that journey must have been quite a learning curve. How was that to not just film a video and have the content every day, but physically finish the process from start to finish every single day?
Yeah, that was really tough, and I talk about this with a lot of the students that I have in courses that I create, which I know we're going to talk about, is that one of the most challenging things is the time, and thinking about do I have the time to do this? And early on is okay, I'm going to give myself 2 hours a day to work on this YouTube video. And at first I thought, I was okay, well, I'm not doing too much. One of the other I guess constraints that I put on myself was I'm not going to use too much B-roll. And for those of you listening, B-roll is just those extra transition shots or fun little things that can make a YouTube video really great, but can also be super time consuming for the amount of time it takes to shoot and edit and find the right placement and transitions for said B-roll. And so I was I'll probably do a lot of talking head kind of videos, because those are a little bit easier. And I thought, okay, I'll be able to do everything in 2 hours. And that was not the case at all. And it kind of got up to 4 hours, and that was a lot to do, because this was just an extra thing. And so you kind of look at it and think, do I either want to constrict and, constrain in a healthy way, the type of video that I want to create so I can get it done in an hour or two each day? Or do I just say, and this is what eventually ended up happening, is okay, well, I have a certain level of polish that I want to give to a video. So, daily just didn't end up being a thing that I could consistently do, because I looked at it and say, and still kind of say one YouTube video with the polish that I want for it takes about 8 or 10 hours, and probably at least. And so I just, block out to make sure that I have that time. But it was only through tracking it proactively and realizing oh, this actually took me 4 or 5 hours instead of 90 minutes or 2 hours, that I was able to better get a grip on either did I need to tighten up the video and constrain what I thought I was going to be able to do, or do I need to just, do a less consistent video than daily, which obviously ended up being the case.
It's really interesting, and B, it's a really good way of getting into it, because again, a lot of people when they're starting get very caught up and overthink things, and kind of diving in and just going content kind of takes a lot away from that. So how, again, another thing that people think is I need to find my niche, and I know this is something that you also struggled with, but almost kind of put it to one side with that. So how much did that 30-day challenge help you, and or just diving straight in almost and not having that niche figured out straight away help you in your journey? Yeah,
I think of this, the way that I think about this, and I've been writing a little bit more about it, is if you can picture an hourglass, visually, then anytime a creator is starting out, you're at the top of the hourglass, so it's a really wide funnel at the top, and you can really talk about whatever you want, because A, you're not 100% sure on your niche or topic, and B, there are not that many people watching. It's just the nature of it. But the more content that you put out, and this is why I think it's so important to be consistent and even be as prolific as you can. I'd rather you put out, 5-minute videos than one 20-25 minute video, just because you're getting more you're getting more at-bats, for lack of a better term, like more chances to like see what resonates with people. And so the more consistent and prolific you can be at like the top of that hourglass, then it naturally starts to narrow, because as you build even a little bit of an audience, you will see that different types of videos, and maybe like one particular type of video that you've been creating, resonates more with people, and then you just start to double down more and more on those one or two like niche topics that you see resonate with people more than others.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I guess that's kind of exactly what happened to you with the bullet journaling, right?
Exactly.
So talk me through that and what was going through your mind. So you're obviously pumping all this content out, and I guess are now conscious of what you're putting out, just to go, this is the kind of stuff I'm putting out, let me see what resonates with people. But yeah, how did you go from I'm just putting stuff out to, oh, I think I found what I'm looking for?
Yeah, it really was still through that consistency, and what I had started to talk more about, the kind of the initial like niching down from just like whatever to like I'm going to talk about. I started talking about like product marketing, because I was working at ConvertKit at the time in email marketing. So I started talking about product marketing from like a SaaS startup perspective. I was also talking about just personal productivity systems. And within the even sub niche of personal productivity, I did a couple of videos. These were like video, somewhere in the 50s of video number that I did. I went like even down a further step in niching from personal productivity to like, here's how I plan my week using a bullet journal. And that video was one that I noticed, because I had enough videos at this time, I was able to see that there was a spike from the bullet journal. I was like, oh, well, that's really interesting. And it is, again, another reason, even if you don't see like these big bumps for a while, at the very least, you've created a like literal benchmark for yourself in terms of your content, so that like for me, like, and I hope everyone starting their YouTube channel or in the early days of their YouTube channel that's watching this or listening to this, like those first 50 videos, I don't think any of them went over 500 views. And when I saw that this bullet journal video had gone over like 800 views, I was like, oh, well, that's very interesting. This is the most popular video by far. And at this point, I had, continued to try testing some other like productivity, product marketing type of videos. Productivity was still doing a little bit better. And so towards the end of 2017, it was shifting obviously into a new year. People love productivity and planning and bullet journaling at the beginning of a new year. So I was like, I'm going to do this mega, bullet journal annual planning video. Here's how I'm planning 2018 with a bullet journal. And I did that video. It was about 20-ish minutes, 25 minutes long. So it was a little bit longer definitely for me and even for the YouTube space. But when I published it, I had like 650 subscribers after a year, basically 11 months. And I thought to myself, I hope this video helps me get to 1,000 subscribers eventually, and that it would be my first video to go over 1,000 views. And it's so funny to think back to that now, and just kind of how our mindset and our like expectations and our benchmarks change. Because now I'm like, if I don't get 1,000 views within like 12 hours, I'm like, this video sucks. But at that time I was like, oh my gosh, this video has over 1,000 views. And it did. Like in the span of a few days, went over 1,000 views. I was getting more subscribers by the end of the week. I had over 1,000 subscribers, and it just kind of kept doubling down from there.
That is awesome. Yes, I'm so glad you found the video, because that's how I discovered you. I'm not saying I was there from the beginning. I absolutely probably wasn't. But your bullet journals, the journal videos are like, this is the time where I fangirl, and I apologize afterwards. But like, your bullet journal videos are great. And
Thank
as
you.
someone who, they're just like, okay, there are people that make these like really artsy bullet journals, and yes, they look great, but
They do look great.
They do.
They look
I'm
amazing.
not artistic though, and they are incredibly like overwhelming almost. They're like, oh, that becomes like an art book, not a productivity guide. And obviously each their own. Like that works for some people; they need that, and that's great. But when I came across your channel, and I was like, oh, it's just getting to the point. It's like, this is great. This is just what I need. So yes, And also, I like the whole pen to paper thing, which naturally kind of fit in. And the other thing I like, because I'm bad with pen and paper, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to ruin like nice pages. And then I'm like watching your videos, and you're like, no, just pen to paper. And I'm like, okay, fine, it's okay to just write stuff down. So yeah, that was awesome, and your videos are great. And every time I'm like, oh, I'm just a bit like, I don't know what to do, I go and check out your videos, and I'm like, simple, back to basics. Let's just do this how it should be done.
That's really cool to hear, and I'm glad that it resonated with you, because I will say that when I was doing some research for those bullet journal videos, especially early on, and this is something that as a creator you can do, especially if you're researching a topic, you're like, I know what I want my topic or my niche to be. One thing that you can do, and I coach a lot of creators through this, is this idea of you can emulate but don't duplicate. Certainly you don't want to copy anyone else's work, but you can find so much inspiration and like ideas from other creators in the same space. And so I always say, like, when I'm like helping someone or coaching someone, I was like, find a few creators that you like and just, take inventory of either their style of how they make a video. It doesn't matter what it's about. You just love how they make a video. Like Matt Diavella makes amazing videos. Now he's also a Netflix level documentary filmmaker, so it would make sense that his are really good. But you can take, what I try and do is when I look at someone, I'm like, what is one little thing, like one little shot or transition or a lighting tip that I can take from someone whose just style I admire. And you can also do it for other people within your niche. And so I watched a lot of other bullet journal videos, and one of the things that you brought up that I noticed was a lot of them were very like artsy, scrapbooky, and like I said, there's nothing wrong with that, but I was like, well, I don't really do that. I wonder if there's like a minimalist, like kind of to the point approach that would resonate with people, because like that's really how, if you do like a little bit of research on the bullet journal itself, that's how it started. Like Ryder Carroll is like, he's like, I would even say I'm fancier than him, and I'm not fancy at all. He's just like, you have a bullet here and then a dash there. I'm like, okay, so this is really, really to the point. So finding the personal like filter or frame that I can put on something that already exists is a good way of looking at something that's an existing market or opportunity. Like I knew that bullet journal was a thing because there were lots of videos about bullet journaling. It was like, I know there's some resonance with how I talk about this. How can I look at other popular topics or ways of doing the bullet journal and then put my own spin on it?
That makes a lot of sense. And I love that emulate, don't duplicate. That's really cool. Yeah. On the subject of what, I know you mentioned Matt Diavella, but what were some of the kind of inspirational YouTubers to you? Were you like me that just, well, maybe not, that just binge watches a whole load of YouTube, or were you like, okay, there's just a couple that stood out for you when you were going through yours?
Yeah, a couple for me. I really love how Amy Landino, Schmidt-tastic.
I've just discovered her. I have no idea how I've only just discovered her, but yes, I am just a little obsessed right now.
Yeah, she's amazing and wonderful. I've been able to work with her some, and she's like just as fantastic in person. And the way that she like structures her content, the way that she like stacks different topics together, the way that she can use subtopics really well. And so like one of her big things is about like morning routines and good morning, good life. But she like still uses that as an initial like top level frame or structure for how she wants to talk about other topics, like whether that's mental health or, whatever it might be. And so I love how she is able to create these relatable contextual subtopics that you wouldn't initially think are connected to her main topic, but she has a really nice way of like framing everything. Another one is just the OG, Casey Neistat. He's probably the first person that I watched a ton of YouTube and a ton of vlogs from, and so he was actually the first person that, from a style perspective, I just loved how that was a lot of the inspiration, him and like that Gary V quote or comment of document, don't create. I was like, what can I do to kind of recreate, even in like a small way? One of the things that I wanted to do in that February challenge that I did was, can I like do one little Casey Neistat trick in every video? And also not like getting onto myself or like being too worked up if I couldn't fit one in, but just looking for like, okay, he does a lot of time lapse of the city. I'm just going to do like a little time lapse here. I'm going to like go downtown and do a time lapse, or like me running past the camera, or doing something, and something with our son. And so there were like all these little things. I'm like, oh, I saw Casey do this. I'm going to try and recreate that a little bit.
Yeah, that's super cool. That's good as well, because then you're not like overwhelming yourself. You're not getting into the duplication, but you're just going, I'm just going to do one thing. Yeah, I like that. In terms of going full-time, what are the kind of the thoughts that go through your mind, and how did you come to that conclusion that it's maybe the right time to go, actually, I can make this full-time?
Yeah, that it was a big decision. It was one that I had been thinking about for months, if not like had been thinking about very seriously for months, and had been in the back of my mind for a couple of years at that point. I think because when I started doing like all the blogging and podcasting, in like 2011 and 2015, that was something that I wanted to like build an audience towards, was becoming a full-time creator. And then I worked in startups and the creator economy for 5 years, and that was wonderful and gave me a lot of like the confidence and the like access or education to be able to make the switch. But there were two big things, and one of them was just a bit more stability or understanding of how I was going to like properly monetize the not just the channel, but also, and I think we want to talk about this some too, but my email marketing as well. So I've been building my email list for the past 4 years as well, and so I started working with a coach, and one of the things he said to me was like, you need to launch a new product every month. I was like, oh no, I can't do that. And he's like, they don't have to be big products. They can be, but you need to launch something. Even if you're going to do a larger course, because one of the things I've done is like, well, over the next few months, I'm going to build a course, and it's going to take about 3 months because, side hustle and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yeah, that's great. Launch it in stages. So you do the first stage of it, you're going to launch, and then the next stage, the next stage, the next stage. You can position it to some people like, hey, do you want to pay ahead for all 3 phases? So there were some cool pricing things that we did, but the biggest thing that he helped me with was, you just need to get better. If you want to sell more stuff, then you need to like make more stuff for sale. And it sounds so simple. It sounds so simple and logical, but you're like, I can't do that. Why would I? People are going to hate me. They're not going to like this stuff. And so there was that aspect of it. So I just got better at monetizing because I was just doing more monetization. And so I was making more money through it. I'll also say that a common misconception for YouTubers from a monetization strategy is that you can do it all just from AdSense. And AdSense, even now, getting close to 60,000 subscribers, AdSense for me is, even on a good month, maybe 10% of overall revenue. So I'm very distributed in terms of my monetization channels, and I will commonly, I'll definitely make more on, and I don't do a ton of sponsorships or brand deals right now, but even doing just 3 or 4 of those throughout the year will give me more than an entire year of AdSense. It's it's like AdSense in my mind basically exists to pay for like other software tools that I run on a month-to-month basis. That's kind of the way that I break it down mentally. And so there's the monetization piece of it. The other side of this of like making the decision and like finally tipping over to like, I'm going to do this full time, because end of summer last year, I was doing a good job with monetizing, and I was doing, way more than I ever, had done in terms of revenue. And I was like, wow, this is really great. And another person that I talked to, another mentor of mine, he's like, I'm glad it's going really well. I was like, yeah, I'm thinking maybe I should just do this full time. He's like, well, you could, but if you can manage it, then you're making your full-time salary and you're doing like at least half, growing to matching that full-time salary. Like you're doing a little double up there. Sounds pretty good. I was like, yeah, that is pretty good. But then what it became for me is that I was just so invested and so interested in the type of content that I was creating and the people that I was reaching. And I had so many more ideas for what I wanted to do and test and experiment that it became like literally all I could think about from a work perspective. And it really came to a point where I was like, I'm doing not just myself a disservice, but if I continue down this path without like really pulling myself back from content creation, then I'm doing like my company a disservice as well. I was working at Podia at the time and they were wonderful. I was like, I can't half-ass these things. And so in October of 2020, I put in my notice and I started working full-time for myself in November. I still had some like contract things that I wrapped up with Podia. And so technically, officially, entirely, January 2021 was me working as a full-time creator on my own content.
It's so freaking cool to hear. I love that. It's amazing stuff. Okay, so that leads nicely into your courses. I think I'm all out of focus. Into your courses and these extra streams of revenue. Because again, exactly to your point, AdSense, whatever people think that haven't got into YouTube isn't gonna like allow you to go full time. But you have done wonderfully well with, and it kind of, I guess, links into your email, but so it might be that we touch on it as we go, but you have done amazingly well with those courses that you've put out, like over the last, I don't know when the first one was, but over time. So how early did you start kind of putting those out? And I guess like you mentioned as well, because you got into it to kind of go full-time eventually. So I guess you already had that mindset and knew where you were going. So what was kind of the thought process and the journey into setting them out? And yeah, how did you go about that? Because I guess there are other people that are like, okay, I recognize that this is something where I want to go, but at what point do you start putting them out?
The first course that I created, and when I was I would say the beginning of 2019 was the first course, and this was a like six lesson productivity course about basically the primary elements of what most people consider like productivity tips and tactics, and then like specific ways to apply them. So like here's how to do goal setting, here's how to like do time management, project management, here's how to eliminate distractions, here's how to like build habits that support your goals, and how all of these different pieces fit together. So I think, and this is something that I think, productivity people and teachers like myself are doing a better and better job of. But I think in the past, a lot of productivity advice was kind of siloed, and it wasn't as clear like how you were going to like integrate those different things together, or you just tried to do every single productivity tip you could ever possibly hear about. And it felt really overwhelming to be like, oh, well, I got to do my morning routine, and then I have to like track my time, and then I got to block my time, and then I got to make sure I do my habits, and then I got to make sure I like focus my deep work, and then like I got to make sure I'm doing this top goal and these top tasks and something about frogs. It's like all these different tips and tactics. You try and do all of them, where one of the things that I have been doing is like giving people these like specific deep dives into each tool, but then saying like, depending on the goal or the outcome that you have, here's how you can kind of mix and match these different productivity systems to be like here's a kind of, I call them like a productivity toolkit. Be like, okay, I have this thing, like I want to create an online course. What kind of productivity tools do I need? Great, here's the kit. Let's go off and do the thing. And I launched the first one of those in January 2019. And then at the end of 2019, I did a larger course. I did a couple of like smaller things in between, but I did a larger course at the end of 2019. And then in 2020, I started doing in 2020, I started doing like small group coaching, and that was kind of a game changer for me as well. And so it was the same kind of strategies, but then basically the group that I was working with, or if I had a one-on-one client, then we just work specifically on, okay, you have this goal. And it was normally something around like content creation, because that's, certainly kind of my wheelhouse. And we'd look at it and say like, okay, here's the content strategy that you're going to use. And now here are also like these productivity strategies that you need to use on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis to make sure that you are making progress towards your goals. And that was really good for me for two ways. One, doing coaching is normally if you have the time and the energy for it, it can be a really good monetization model because people naturally associate, a higher price with coaching, and we can kind of get back into a scaled version of this. But the other thing that it really helped me with was, and this just helps me when I work with people on Zoom or, in person back in the day, hopefully in the future day, then I see, like, when I'm with people, I can see when they light up about a particular like tip or tactic, or I share something, they're like, oh, that makes sense. And it's not as obvious for me if I'm just like putting a course out there and maybe it resonates, maybe it doesn't. And so by doing all of that coaching, I was then able to like really make then a better course for people who are coming through, because like, okay, I know that this lesson, I know that this tip like really resonated, and the way that I can talk about it and connect it to these other tips is going to make a lot more sense because I've been working with people one-on-one or one-on-some for the past like 3 months for this. And so I did that basically from May to November of last year. Yeah, May to December of last year. And then I compressed like the top 8 to 10 lessons from all of that coaching and group work, and relaunched a cohort course that now I've been running. That is like basically everything that I've described. So here are these core fundamentals, these productivity pillars, as I call them. And we take the way that it's structured now is it's a 6-week course. And at the beginning, you set aside what we call the pillar project, like the thing that you absolutely want to get done over the next 6 weeks. And over the course of those 6 weeks, we meet twice a week. So it is like there's the course element because there are lessons that they can go through. But then there's the live element where we get on and say like, hey, we're going to be talking about goal setting today. We're going to talk about weekly planning and review today. And they get to apply those lessons. They can do it like against their own work, but usually they learn those lessons in the context of their pillar project. So they have something to practice on almost while they're learning these things. So they get something big done that makes them feel really good. And then they have the confidence that like, okay, I know all these different like productivity tools and tips that I can, deploy and assemble anytime that I want based on the things that I want to be doing.
I love the idea of a productivity toolkit, because I am just like the person that I'll hear about one thing or remember something one week. I'll be like, I'm just going to go ham on that. But like the idea of picking the right thing for the right situation, that's really, really cool. Okay, you've touched on a couple of things there that I really want to go over. So I'm going to kind of almost rewind a little. So in terms of starting the course, you said obviously that was, I think, the beginning of 2019. Mm-hmm. Yes, awesome. So at that point, how do you start that? So I don't know what your sub count was at that time, but yeah, I'm guessing it was a lot less than it is now. And therefore, is this where email kind of plays a part? So how do you go out to people and actually be able to put on a course where people will sign up? Yeah,
absolutely. So for anyone listening, and especially YouTubers, podcasters too, but absolutely build an email list, because from the start, I would say that at least 80% of my sales come through my email list, even though it is not near the size in terms of subscribers as my YouTube channel. Now I will say there's plenty of overlap. Like the majority of people on my email list are also on my YouTube channel. But when I launch something and I like have an announcement video on YouTube, and then I certainly announce on email, it's literally even for nearly 60,000 subscribers, it's literally a handful of people who buy only through YouTube. Like they only hear about it through YouTube. There are other people who certainly have differing results, but I'd be really interested to ask, like, our mutual friend Ali Abdal, who did Part-Time YouTuber Academy, is one of the places we connected as well. So I figured that he had a lot of sales through his YouTube channel, but I would still guess that even his email list being a fraction of the size of his YouTube channel drove a more than disproportionate amount of sales, given the discrepancy in numbers. So absolutely 100%, please start an email list. ConvertKit is great. There's lots of tools, but ConvertKit is the one that I worked at and still use, and they're really focused on creators, which I love.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think that's definitely one to shout out. And I think the moral of that is it's never too early to start an email list either, right? So you might as well start one straight away. And you're right. I think for cohort 1, Ali did probably only even go out to Twitter or something. He didn't even announce it. So you're right, actually. The big thing is either Twitter or your email list. That's a great point, actually. So you don't need hundreds of thousands of subscribers.
No, not at all. And I think at the time, I maybe had like 15, 17,000 YouTube subscribers at that time. And I had, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 email subscribers at that point. And the way that I was getting, just as a little subtext, but the way that I was getting YouTube subscribers to convert to email usually, and this example is specific to the bullet journal, but you can just think of, what would emulate, don't duplicate. What is your example of this? I just had like a bullet journal template, like download PDF that people could use, which still to this day, like brings me in subscribers and kind of boggles my mind because it's just like a printed page. You can't, when I look at this, I'm like, you can't use this. People aren't going to download this. But it does give people a little bit more visual option of some things that they could do. And so I had been getting subscribers in that way. I had probably 3,000 subscribers at that time. And really I did the entire launch just on email. I don't even think I mentioned it on YouTube at that time. And so I just emailed out and basically said, hey, I'm going to be doing this six lesson program. Every lesson will come out on Monday, starting in the new year. So it'll take you, through the first month, help you with your habits, help you with focus, help you plan out things. If you're interested, click here. And ConvertKit has this feature where you can tag someone if they click on a link. So I had this little subset of people who indicated interest in the course. And then I just started to email them separately, sometimes one at a time, especially if they responded to the email, and just ask them things like, hey, what would you want to learn about in this? What is something that I've talked about in a video that you would like me to elaborate on more? So just doing a lot of direct Q&A, and that continues to apply. And through no matter how big you get, I think, because one of the biggest mistakes that I made about this most recent launch that I had that, to be honest, didn't quite meet the internal expectations or goals that I had for it. And looking back, as I realized that I didn't do as much just customer interaction or buyer interaction to try and figure out okay, I'm going to be making some changes to this. Are these changes going to resonate? Are these the things that people actually want to hear? Am I just guessing? And no matter how much you may understand your audience, there's nothing better than just asking them. Even if it's just a couple of people, you'll get some really interesting answers.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I guess that's where the power of Twitter might even come in, because it's very simple to do Twitter polls or something, or just to get engaged with your audience there. That makes a lot of sense. Going back to your email list, you said you had 3,000 or 4,000-ish email subscribers. So yes, at that point. How did you go about building your email list? Was that people that had come from YouTube, like you said, through the bullet journal, or? Yeah,
almost entirely. So again, this was using ConvertKit. I just set up a simple landing page in ConvertKit and said, go to mattragland.com/bullet journal or mattragland.com/YouTube, and you'll be able to get a free bullet journal productivity pack. And they just downloaded it from there.
Okay, and I guess the other thing on the courses is, like you said, you kind of created these courses over time, and then you built up, and then you created coaching, like a plan of coaching, and then you've almost come back down the other way. You've kind of gone up, great coaching, and then brought that back down. So yeah, how does that kind of, I know you've touched on it a little bit, but how did that kind of feed to go, yeah, I'm at the right point to now offer coaching?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought us back to that, because it's a really unique way of thinking about how you can build a creator-powered business. And something that I actually wish I had done sooner was to offer coaching, because it's one of the weirdest things that a creator can realize, especially if you're in a niche that kind of has some natural coaching elements. And I think at this point, pretty much anything can, but some like productivity does have like some more coachable elements to it. But because one of the things that you'll realize, and was kind of a mindset shift for me, was even when you get an appropriate number of subscribers to think like, oh, maybe I could get 100 sales for this. Like if you have, 1,000, 5,000 subscribers, so like, okay, 50, 100, that's doable. If you want to make, say, $5,000 or $10,000 on like your ideas, basically, no matter what format those ideas come in, it is actually, this is going to blow some of your minds, but it is actually easier to sell to people a $5,000 coaching package than it is to sell 100 people a $100 product.
Yeah, you're right. That did blow my mind a little.
It's our own like limiting beliefs and ideas about like, oh, I can't charge that, because even right before I sold a package, I was talking to my coach and he's like, yeah, you offer like $1,000 a month for coaching. And I'm like, no, like I had to get over a lot of tension just to pay you that. And that was very scary. Like, and you're you, I'm just me. And what you got to realize is, to someone on your list, you are that person. And you only need to find a couple of them. And it's pretty crazy to think about, because for a lot of people, and especially for the right people, and I think I've heard Ali talk about this, Sam Parr talked about this recently on a podcast too. I can't remember which one. He's been on a bunch since they sold The Hustle. But he said once someone gets over the mental hurdle of, I will give you any amount of money, giving you exponentially more money is not the same type of decision. Like, it is so difficult to get someone, sometimes, to get someone to pay you money for something. But once they pay you money for something, or they decide they're going to give you money, then it's like, okay, it's not the same kind of mental gymnastics for them to go from $100 to $1,000 as it is to go from $0 to $100. It's pretty wild, and so I think, and now what I consult some people on doing, depending on their niche and content, is like, can you, if you were going to charge $5,000 for 3 months of coaching, what would that plan look like? What kind of person would you target? Because you probably can find on your list a couple of people who are willing to pay you $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for coaching. And so can you find those few people to get to 10K? Because it's probably going to be easier. And this is the other part. So I would actually encourage more people to start with higher level coaching than they may feel personally prepared for, because now, like I was talking about with the group coaching I did last year, now when you talk to those people, especially if they are within your niche and within the type of course that you would want to create, is you work with them, you deliver great value, you have case study, incredible case studies and testimonials at that point. And you also know, because you've been working with them, oh, this part really works, this part does not. And you then start to craft your course lessons based on those things that really resonate. And you just can continue to start from a high point and kind of scale back down, knowing that now that you've established a coaching pricing point, you can also now, people who come in at the course level, you can also bring them up to the coaching level as well. So you can say, once someone has bought your $500 course, and be like, hey, this has been really great. Do you want to do more of this? And so really the way that I think about it now with monetization is, I will do these monthly like expert workshops, and sometimes like it's just a like have your most productive week ever like series that I run, and that's like $100. But then from that, a good portion of those will convert into the like $500 course. And then after the $500 course, you have a smaller number, but still a number that then convert into a coaching program. And that cycle just, keeps on spinning.
That you make it sound like it is very logical, but you make it sound very possible.
It is very possible. It's not always as easy as sounding that as that. And, I could, go into much more detail. Maybe we could do another episode of like, just like the positioning and the messaging and being like, okay, and kind of being okay with whatever the results are of a particular launch, and just knowing that, because one of the things that I'm working on the most right now is like refining the message and the positioning of what I offer, not just from a course or coaching perspective, but because all of this really begins to work together in a sometimes challenging but really healthy way of people know what you're about on YouTube, on your podcast, wherever you are, so that they understand more of what to expect in the courses or in coaching with you. And so they're just really excited about it. One of the challenges that I've been facing over the last 6 months is with so much of my audience, so much of my early audience being so much about the bullet journal, that then like talking about something that is like basically the logical outcome of a good bullet journal is a productive system. But making that shift when I haven't, I haven't so far been as, as like forceful in a way, like, and specific about it in a way on YouTube, that then like having a course about that, I've realized that I have to do a lot more like repositioning and kind of re-education or expansion inside of my email list. And so, all of those kind of work together, and that's been the most interesting part of it the past like several months.
I think for anyone that's listening could probably agree. I think it's kind of opened, at least definitely my eyes and probably, hopefully, other people's eyes into what can come of a YouTube channel or even an email list, or the combination of both. And therefore, it's not just YouTube AdSense, it's actually YouTube career, full-time content creation. It is possible, and it's actually possible without the hundreds and thousands or millions of subscribers that at least I thought you needed.
Yeah, no, not at all. Like there's a lot of monetization potential in an email list, just because that's where you can really be really clear with people about like, hey, this is the logical outcome of like the stuff I talk about on YouTube. Because the weird thing about YouTube is like, to be ultra specific on YouTube or like really talk to the thing that you want to be sharing isn't always great for the algorithm. But as long as I'm telling this story, I'm positioning this message, this tip, this tactic for someone that I know will be a best fit, a best fit person for me to work with, that this can really help, then like you know that you have the whole system in place to support them.
Matt, thank you so much. I've had an incredibly good time, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time out to do this. So thank you.
Bhav, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me and staying on me to join. I would, totally open to doing it again. And yeah, thanks so much.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much.
Awesome.